The Wall That Weeps Red. Chapter 1, The House at Greymarrow. The road to Greymarrow House was a wound in the earth, a serpentine scar carved through a wilderness of gnarled roots and twisted brambles, where skeletal trees clawed at the sky like broken hands, their branches writhing in the half-light as if alive, reaching for something lost in the fog. The mist clung to Elena Voss's car like a lover's breath, cold and suffocating, curling around the vehicle with a will of its own, its tendrils seeping through the cracks, chilling her to the bone. The car rattled over the uneven ground, its headlights flickering as if afraid to pierce the gloom, casting fleeting glimpses of the landscape, trees that seemed to lean closer, their bark scarred with patterns that looked too much like faces, their eyes hollow, watching. The air was thick with the stench of wet earth and decay, a sour, cloying smell that coated her throat, as if the ground itself were rotting, exhaling secrets that curled into the night like smoke, heavy with the weight of ancient sins. Elena stepped out, her boots sinking into the mud, the cold seeping through her soles like a living thing, her breath fogging in the biting chill that seemed to radiate from the manor itself, wrapping around her like a shroud, tightening with every step. A historian and restorer by trade, she was drawn to old houses, each one a labyrinth of stories etched in wood and stone, whispering tales of forgotten lives, their walls holding memories of joy, sorrow, love, and loss. But Greymarrow was different. It didn't just stand, it breathed. Its silhouette loomed against the bruised sky, a monstrous edifice of crumbling stone and blackened spires, its gargoyles leering from the eaves like vultures awaiting carrion, their eyes glinting with a light that wasn't stone, their mouths frozen in silent screams that seemed to echo in her mind. The windows were dark, yet she swore she saw movement, a flicker of shadow, a glimpse of something alive, watching her with eyes that pierced the dark, their gaze heavy, hungry, alive. She shook off the thought, hoisting her bag of tools, the weight grounding her, anchoring her to reality, though her pulse raced, her heart thudding like a drum in her chest. The job paid too well, almost suspiciously so, to let superstition cloud her judgment, but her skin prickled as she approached, the manor's presence pressing against her like a hand on her throat, squeezing just enough to make her breath catch, her hands tremble. The air hummed faintly, a low vibration that seemed to come from the earth itself, resonating in her bones, whispering a name she couldn't quite catch, a sound that lingered like a curse. The oak door groaned open before she could knock, a deep, guttural sound that reverberated in her chest, echoing like a warning bell, shaking the ground beneath her feet. Mrs. Calder stood there, a wiry woman with eyes like chipped flint, gray and unyielding, their depths heavy with secrets she wouldn't voice. Her hair was pulled tight into a bun that seemed to strain against her scalp, as if holding back something wild, her lips pressed into a thin line, guarding a truth she'd rather die than share. Her hands were clasped tightly, knuckles white, trembling slightly, betraying a fear that flickered in her gaze like a candle in a storm. "Miss Voss," she said, her voice sharp as a blade, cutting through the silence like a warning, each word heavy with unspoken dread, echoing in the air like a curse. "You're late." "Blame the roads," Elena replied, brushing past into the foyer, her tone light but her heart heavy, her boots echoing on the polished floor, the sound too loud in the oppressive silence, reverberating like a heartbeat. The air inside was damp, thick with mildew and something sharper, iron, or blood, a metallic tang that coated her tongue, clung to her throat like a second skin, filling her lungs with dread. Shadows danced in the corners, though no wind stirred the tattered curtains, their edges frayed like old wounds, their fabric heavy with dust that seemed to shimmer faintly, alive. A chandelier hung overhead, its crystals dulled by grime, swaying slightly as if touched by an unseen hand, its clinking a faint, mournful song that echoed with the house's grief, its presence heavy, hungry. The walls were lined with portraits, their subjects' eyes following her, their faces blurred by time but sharp with intent, their gazes piercing, heavy with secrets that seemed to pulse in the half-light, as if alive. A staircase spiraled upward, its banister carved with roses that seemed to curl under her gaze, their thorns gleaming like blades, their petals pulsing faintly, as if breathing, their presence alive, hungry. The floorboards creaked beneath her weight, each step a violation the house resented, the sound echoing like a heartbeat in the cavernous space, too loud, too alive, too aware. "Where do I start?" Elena asked, forcing her voice steady, her eyes scanning the foyer, her heart pounding, her breath shallow, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped her bag. Mrs. Calder handed her a ring of iron keys, cold and heavy as a chain, their edges biting into Elena's palm like teeth, their chill seeping into her bones, grounding her but not enough to shake the feeling of being watched. "The east wing needs work. Stay out of the west. And don't work after dark." Her gaze hardened, boring into Elena's with an intensity that made her stomach twist, a silent plea buried in her flinty eyes, a warning she wouldn't voice, her hands trembling slightly, betraying her fear. "Whatever you do, don't touch the wall with roses carved above it." Elena raised an eyebrow, masking her unease with a smirk, her skepticism a shield against the growing dread that coiled in her chest, tightening like a noose. "Roses? That's oddly specific." Her voice was light, but her pulse quickened, her hands trembling, her heart thudding. "It's not a suggestion," Mrs. Calder snapped, her voice dropping to a whisper that seemed to echo in the walls, a hiss that lingered like a curse, heavy with the weight of something ancient, something alive. "This house doesn't forgive mistakes. It remembers. It claims." Her eyes glinted with something like pity, or fear, their depths dark with secrets, their gaze heavy, piercing. "Claims." Elena scoffed, clinging to her rationality like a lifeline, though her pulse raced, her hands trembling as she gripped the keys, their cold biting into her palm. "It's stone and mortar, Mrs. Calder, not a ghost story. I'm here to fix it, not write a novel." But her words felt hollow, her skepticism cracking under the weight of the house's presence, the air humming faintly, whispering her name. Mrs. Calder's eyes narrowed, her lips twisting into a thin, bitter smile, her gaze heavy with pity, or dread. "You'll see, Miss Voss. You'll see." She turned away, her footsteps echoing too long in the cavernous hall, each one a warning that lingered in the air like a shadow, a promise of something coming, something hungry. The door clicked shut behind her, a sound as final as a coffin lid, leaving Elena alone in the foyer, the silence heavy, oppressive, alive, pressing against her like a hand, squeezing her breath, whispering her name. She stood there, the keys biting into her palm, their cold seeping into her bones, grounding her but not enough to shake the feeling of being watched, the manor's presence suffusing every moment, its walls watching, its shadows alive. The portrait's eyes followed her, their gazes sharp, their faces seeming to shift in the half-light, smiling, sneering, waiting, their presence heavy, hungry. She shook her head, muttering, "Get to work, Elena," her voice swallowed by the silence, echoing back distorted, as if the house were mocking her, laughing at her defiance. But as she climbed the creaking staircase, the shadows seemed to follow, curling like fingers at her heels, the roses on the banister pulsing faintly, their thorns gleaming, their petals breathing, the air growing thicker, heavier, as if the house were swallowing her whole, claiming her as its own, its voice whispering, relentless, circling, hungry. Chapter 2, Scratches Beneath the Paint. The west corridor was a crypt, its air thick with dust and the sour tang of decay, a smell that clung to the back of Elena's throat like a warning, coating her lungs with dread, filling her with a sense of violation, as if the house resented her presence. Despite Mrs. Calder's warning, she couldn't resist. The historian in her craved answers, and the West Wing called to her like a siren song, its pull magnetic, undeniable, a whisper in her blood that urged her forward, drowning out her fear, her reason, her doubt. She set up her work lamp, its beam cutting through the gloom like a blade, illuminating peeling wallpaper in shades of green and gold, faded by time but heavy with secrets, their patterns swirling like eyes watching her, their edges frayed like old wounds, pulsing faintly, as if alive. The floorboards groaned under her weight, each creak a protest, a warning, as if the house were alive, its walls breathing, its shadows curling, its presence heavy, hungry. She began scraping at the wallpaper, her movements methodical, her scraper's edge slicing through decades of neglect, the sound sharp in the silence, like nails on a chalkboard, echoing like a scream. The patterns flaked away in brittle strips, revealing cold stone beneath, and something else that made her breath catch, her hand freezing mid-motion, her heart thudding in her chest, her pulse racing like a drum. Gouge marks, deep and jagged, scarred the plaster, a chaotic web of scratches that seemed to pulse under the lamplight, their edges stained with a faint red that glistened like blood, their presence alive, hungry. They weren't random. The marks formed patterns, frantic and deliberate, as if someone had clawed at the wall in a desperate bid for freedom, their anguish carved into the stone, their despair a living thing, whispering to her, calling her name. Elena traced them with gloved fingers, her pulse quickening, her skin prickling as if the marks were alive, their edges sharp under her touch, their presence heavy, suffocating. "What the hell?" she whispered, stepping back, her voice trembling in the oppressive silence, barely audible, swallowed by the house, echoing back distorted, as if the walls were mocking her. The air grew colder, her breath visible in the lamplight, though the corridor was sealed tight, its windows boarded shut, their edges sealed with rusted nails that seemed to weep rust, like tears, their presence heavy, alive. The shadows shifted, curling like fingers along the walls, forming shapes, hands reaching, eyes gleaming, a face that vanished when she blinked, its presence lingering like a cold breath on her neck, whispering her name. She scraped further, her hands trembling, the scraper's edge catching on the stone, sending a shiver up her arm, as if the house were resisting her, fighting back, its walls pulsing faintly, as if breathing. The marks spread, a tapestry of despair etched across the wall, some so deep they seemed to bleed dust, their edges stained with red that glistened, pulsed, as if alive, their presence heavy, hungry. Beneath a layer of grime, she found a carving, Catherine. The letters were uneven, scratched with something sharp, a nail, perhaps, or a shard of bone, each stroke a cry for help, a scream frozen in time, its presence alive, pulsing under her touch, as if it carried a heartbeat, a rhythm that matched her own racing pulse, echoing in her chest like a drum. The corridor fell silent, the kind of silence that screamed, heavy and suffocating, pressing against her chest like a hand, squeezing the breath from her lungs, the air thick with the stench of iron and rot, cloying, suffocating, coating her throat. Old houses have stories, Elena told herself, but her voice trembled, barely audible, swallowed by the silence, her skepticism cracking under the weight of the marks, the name, the house's presence, its walls watching, its shadows alive. Her lamp flickered, as if caught in a draft, though the air was still, stagnant, heavy with intent, the shadows twisting, forming a silhouette, a woman, her head bowed, her hands clawing at the air, her eyes black voids that seemed to drink the light, her presence heavy, hungry. The vision vanished, but the air remained thick, the wall pulsing faintly, as if breathing, its surface rippling under the lamplight, its roses curling tighter, their thorns gleaming like teeth, dripping red, gleaming like blood. She packed her tools, her hands shaking, vowing to stay away, her heart pounding, her breath shallow, her pulse racing. But as she turned to leave, she heard it, a faint scratching, like nails dragging across stone, coming from behind the wall, slow and deliberate, rhythmic like a heartbeat, echoing in her mind, burrowing into her thoughts like a worm. She froze, her lamp trembling in her hand, her heart thudding, her breath catching. "It's just the wind," she muttered, but the corridor was sealed, the air dead, the silence heavy with intent, whispering her name. The scratching grew louder, joined by a low, keening wail, faint but unmistakable, carrying a weight of anguish that made her blood run cold, her skin crawling, her heart pounding like a drum. She pressed her ear to the stone, her breath shallow, her heart hammering, her hands trembling, the cold seeping into her bones, chilling her to the core. The wail intensified, a woman's voice, broken and raw, weaving through the scratching, forming words she couldn't quite catch, a plea, a curse, a scream frozen in time, echoing in her mind like a blade, cutting through her thoughts. "Catherine," she whispered, her voice trembling, her lips dry, her mind racing, her heart thudding, her breath ragged. The wail stopped, replaced by a whisper, clear and chilling, echoing in her mind, sharp as a knife, heavy with intent, "You know my name." Elena stumbled back, her lamp flickering, the shadows twisting into claws, reaching for her, their edges sharp, their presence heavy, alive, hungry. Her tools clattered to the floor, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps, her heart pounding like a drum, her pulse racing. She ran, her footsteps pounding, the scratching following her like a shadow, relentless, burrowing into her mind like a worm, the wall rippling behind her, the roses curling tighter, their thorns dripping red, gleaming like blood in the lamplight, their presence alive, hungry. The corridor seemed to stretch, the walls closing in, the air growing thicker, heavier, as if the house were swallowing her whole, claiming her as its own, its voice whispering, relentless, circling, hungry. Chapter 3, First Blood. Sleep eluded Elena that night, her mind a battlefield of fear and doubt, the manor's presence pressing against her like a weight, its walls watching, its shadows alive, their edges sharp with intent, their presence heavy, hungry. The house groaned around her, its timbers creaking like bones settling, its windows rattling in a wind that didn't exist, their panes shuddering as if trying to escape, their edges weeping condensation like tears, their presence alive, watching. Her room was a prison of shadows, the walls pressing in, the air thick with the scent of mildew and something sharper, metallic, like blood, coating her throat, filling her lungs, choking her with dread. She lay awake, her mind racing, the memory of the wall's red smear burning behind her eyes, the whisper of Catherine echoing in her ears, a name that felt alive, heavy with intent, burrowing into her thoughts like a worm. At midnight, unable to resist, she lit a candle, its flame trembling in her hand, casting flickering shadows that danced like specters, their edges sharp, their movements alive, their presence heavy, hungry. She crept back to the west corridor, her heart pounding, her breath shallow, her boots echoing on the floorboards, each step a violation the house resented, its walls pulsing faintly, as if breathing. The rose carving above the wall glowed faintly, its petals sharp as thorns in the flickering light, their edges seeming to pulse with a life of their own, curling like fingers, reaching for her, their presence alive, hungry. The air was heavy, thick with the stench of iron and something sweeter, like rotting roses, cloying and suffocating, clinging to her skin like damp cloth, coating her throat, choking her. She hesitated, Mrs. Calder's warning echoing in her mind, "Don't touch the wall." But curiosity burned hotter than fear, a fire that consumed her reason, urging her forward, drowning out her doubts, her hands trembling, her heart thudding. She reached out, her bare fingers brushing the stone, her breath catching, her pulse racing. It was ice cold, and wet. A single drop of dark red liquid oozed from the point of contact, thick and slow, like blood from a fresh wound, glistening in the candlelight, pulsing with a life of its own, its presence heavy, hungry. Elena yanked her hand back, her heart hammering, her breath ragged, her mind screaming for logic, her skepticism crumbling like ash, her hands trembling, her pulse racing. "Rust," she whispered, clinging to rationality like a drowning woman to a raft, her voice trembling, barely audible, swallowed by the silence, echoing back distorted, as if the house were mocking her. But the drop moved, defying gravity, crawling toward her hand like a living thing, its surface pulsing, gleaming with an unnatural light, its path deliberate, hungry, alive. She stumbled back, the candle flame sputtering, casting wild shadows across the walls, twisting into shapes, hands reaching, faces contorted, eyes that gleamed with malice, watching her, their gazes heavy, alive, hungry. The corridor seemed to narrow, the walls leaning in, their surfaces rippling, the roses above curling tighter, their thorns dripping red, gleaming like blood, their presence alive, hungry. Elena's breath caught, her pulse a drumbeat in her ears, her hands trembling as she held up the candle, its light flickering, barely holding back the dark, its flame trembling like her heart, its presence weak against the house's hunger. The red drop pulsed, spreading into a thin smear across the stone, forming veins that throbbed with a sickening rhythm, glowing faintly, casting eerie shadows that danced like specters, their edges sharp, alive. The air grew heavier, pressing against her chest like a hand, squeezing the breath from her lungs, the stench of blood overwhelming, filling her lungs, choking her, coating her throat. "Who's there?" she called, her voice shaking, barely audible in the oppressive silence, swallowed by the house, echoing back distorted, as if the walls were laughing. The whisper answered, closer now, a woman's voice, soft and broken, echoing in her mind like a blade, cutting through her thoughts, heavy with intent. "You touched me." Elena's knees buckled, the candle slipping from her fingers, plunging the corridor into darkness, the flame snuffed out like a life extinguished, the silence heavy, oppressive, alive, pressing against her like a hand, whispering her name. The whisper grew louder, circling her, a chorus of voices now, all saying the same name, Catherine, Catherine, Catherine. The air was thick, suffocating, the stench of blood overwhelming, coating her throat, filling her lungs, choking her, the shadows curling like fingers, their edges sharp, their presence alive, hungry. She scrambled to her feet, her hands scraping against the floor, her nails catching on the wood, her breath ragged, her heart pounding like a drum. She ran, her footsteps pounding, the darkness swallowing her screams, the scratching following her like a shadow, relentless, burrowing into her mind like a worm, the walls rippling, the roses curling tighter, their thorns dripping red, gleaming like blood, their presence alive, hungry. She reached her room, slamming the door, her hands shaking as she fumbled with the lock, her breath ragged, her heart thudding, her pulse racing. The silence returned, but it wasn't empty. The scratching came again, faint but relentless, like nails carving a name, echoing through the walls, seeping into her mind, circling like a predator, whispering her name, heavy with intent. She sank to the floor, her back against the door, her hands trembling, her candle gone, the darkness pressing in, alive and hungry, its presence suffusing every moment, claiming her as its own, the house watching, its walls waiting, its shadows curling like fingers, their edges sharp, their voices whispering, relentless, hungry. Chapter 4, The Name in the Brick. Morning brought no comfort, the manor's silence heavy, oppressive, like a predator lying in wait, its walls watching, its shadows alive, their edges sharp with intent, their presence heavy, hungry. Elena returned to the west corridor, armed with her scraper and a desperate need for answers, her heart pounding, her hands unsteady, her breath shallow, her pulse racing. The wall looked different, its edges sharper, its surface bulging slightly, like a swollen bruise, pulsing faintly under the lamplight, a rhythm that matched her racing pulse, echoing in her chest like a drum, its presence alive, hungry. The rose carving above it was more defined, as if freshly etched overnight, its petals curling tighter, their thorns gleaming like teeth, catching the light in a way that made her skin crawl, her stomach twist, her heart thudding. The air was thick, heavy with the stench of iron and rot, the floorboards creaking under her weight, each step a violation the house resented, its walls pulsing faintly, as if breathing, its presence suffusing every moment. She chipped away more plaster, her hands trembling, the scraper's edge catching on the stone, sending a shiver up her arm, as if the house were resisting her, fighting back, its walls alive, hungry. The gouge marks spread further, a chaotic web of anguish, some so deep they seemed to bleed dust, their edges stained with a faint red that glistened, pulsed, as if alive, their presence heavy, suffocating. Beneath a layer of grime, she found the full carving, Catherine. The letters were deeper now, filled with a dark red stain that pulsed faintly under the lamplight, as if alive, a heartbeat echoing in the stone, matching her own racing pulse, echoing in her chest like a drum, its presence heavy, hungry. She whispered the name, testing its weight, her voice barely audible, trembling in the silence, her lips dry, her heart thudding, her breath shallow. A breath answered, cold against her neck, raising the hairs on her arms, sending a chill down her spine, her skin crawling, her heart pounding. She spun, her lamp sweeping the corridor, but it was empty, the shadows still, yet heavy with presence, their edges sharp, watching her, their gaze alive, hungry. "Who's there?" she called, her voice swallowed by the silence, echoing back distorted, as if the house were mocking her, its walls laughing, its shadows curling. The air grew heavier, pressing against her chest like a hand, squeezing the breath from her lungs, the stench of blood and rot overwhelming, choking her, coating her throat. Her tools clattered to the floor, her hands shaking, her heart pounding like a drum, her pulse racing. The wail came again, low and keening, faint but unmistakable, coming from behind the wall, a woman's voice, broken and raw, carrying a weight of anguish that made her blood run cold, her skin crawling, her heart thudding. She pressed her ear to the stone, her breath shallow, her heart hammering, her hands trembling, the cold seeping into her bones, chilling her to the core. The wail grew louder, weaving through the scratching, forming words she couldn't quite catch, a plea, a curse, a scream frozen in time, echoing in her mind like a blade, cutting through her thoughts, heavy with intent. "Catherine?" she whispered, her voice trembling, her lips dry, her mind racing, her heart pounding, her breath ragged. The wail stopped, replaced by a whisper, clear and chilling, echoing in her mind like a blade, cutting through her thoughts, heavy with intent. "You know my name." The voice was soft, almost tender, but it carried a weight of malice that made Elena's knees buckle, her breath catching, her heart thudding, her pulse racing. She stumbled back, her lamp flickering, the shadows twisting into a silhouette, a woman, her head bowed, her hands clawing at the air, her eyes black voids that seemed to drink the light, her presence heavy, alive, hungry. The vision vanished, but the air remained thick, the wall pulsing faintly, as if breathing, its surface rippling under the lamplight, its roses curling tighter, their thorns dripping red, gleaming like blood, their presence alive, hungry. Elena grabbed her tools, her hands shaking, her breath ragged, her heart pounding, her pulse racing, and ran. The corridor seemed to stretch, the walls closing in, the roses above the wall curling tighter, their thorns dripping red, their petals pulsing with a sickening rhythm, their presence heavy, hungry. She reached her room, slamming the door, her hands fumbling with the lock, her heart thudding, her breath shallow, her pulse racing. The house was silent, but the scratching followed, faint but relentless, echoing in her mind like a promise of something coming, something hungry, something that knew her name, its voice whispering, relentless, circling, claiming her as its own, its presence suffusing every moment, alive, hungry. Chapter 5, Jonas Arrives. The knock came at dusk, sharp and frantic, shattering the manor's oppressive silence, a sound that cut through the air like a scream, echoing in the foyer like a warning, shaking the walls, reverberating in her bones. Elena opened the door to find Jonas, her estranged younger brother, drenched in rain, his eyes wild and bloodshot, his clothes disheveled, his skin pale as bone, almost translucent in the fading light, his thin frame trembling in the cold, his presence fragile, haunted. He looked like a ghost, his hands clutching a tattered backpack, his fingers white-knuckled, his nails bitten to the quick, his breath shallow, his eyes darting to the shadows as if expecting something to lunge from them, his heart pounding, visible through his thin chest, his pulse racing. "Elena," he gasped, his voice raw, his fingers bruising her arm as he grabbed her, his touch desperate, almost painful, his eyes gleaming with a feverish intensity, his breath ragged. "I had to come. I saw her, wailing, trapped in the walls." "Jonas, what the hell?" Elena pulled him inside, her stomach twisting, her heart pounding, her hands trembling as she shut the door, the sound echoing like a coffin lid, heavy with finality. They hadn't spoken in years, not since his last stint in a psychiatric ward, his visions and breakdowns driving a wedge between them, a chasm she'd never bridged, her guilt a weight she carried like a stone, heavy in her chest, suffocating. She dismissed his claims as delusions, the product of a fractured mind, but the memory of the bleeding wall, the whisper of Catherine, stopped her, rooting her to the spot, her breath catching, her heart thudding, her pulse racing. "How did you find me?" "I dreamed it," he said, his voice trembling, his eyes darting to the shadows, his hands shaking as he clutched his backpack, his breath shallow, his skin graying, his pulse racing. The house. The woman. Her name, Catherine. She's screaming, "Elena. She knows we're here. She's been waiting." His words were feverish, his eyes gleaming with a light that wasn't his, a light that made her skin crawl, her stomach twist, her heart pound. Elena froze, her blood running cold, the name echoing in her mind like a gunshot, her hands trembling as she grabbed his shoulders, her nails digging into his skin, her voice sharp, cutting through the silence, heavy with dread. "What did you say?" Her heart raced, her mind reeling, her breath catching, her pulse pounding. "How do you know that name?" "I've seen her," Jonas whispered, his gaze hollow, his eyes gleaming with a feverish intensity, his hands trembling as he clutched her arms, his breath shallow, his voice raw, his pulse racing. "Every night for weeks. She's in the walls, clawing, bleeding. Her eyes, they're empty, but they see me. She's been waiting for us." His words were heavy, laden with a truth she couldn't deny, their weight suffocating, their presence alive, hungry. "For what?" Elena demanded, shaking him, her voice rising with panic, her heart pounding, her mind racing, her hands trembling, her pulse racing. "Jonas, you're not making sense. You're not well. You need to leave, this place isn't safe." He laughed, a brittle, broken sound that echoed in the foyer, chilling her to the bone, a laugh that wasn't his, sharp and jagged like broken glass, its edges cutting through the silence, heavy with intent. Not well. You think I'm crazy, don't you? You always have. But you felt it too, didn't you? This house, it's not just stone. It's alive. It's hungry. His eyes gleamed, his lips curling into a smile that wasn't his, a smile that made her skin crawl, her stomach twist, her heart thudding, her pulse racing. Elena's throat tightened, her skepticism warring with the memory of the red smear, the whisper in the dark, the scratching that followed her, echoing in her mind like a curse, heavy with intent. She wanted to dismiss him, to send him away, to cling to logic, but the weight of his words, the fear in his eyes, stopped her, her heart pounding, her hands trembling, her breath shallow, her pulse racing. You can't stay here, she said, but her voice lacked conviction, trembling with doubt, her heart thudding, her hands shaking. This place, it's not safe. Safe. Jonas's eyes gleamed, his lips curling into a smile that wasn't his, a smile that made her blood run cold, her stomach twist, her heart pound. It's too late for safe, Elena. She's already chosen us. You touched the wall, didn't you? You felt her. His words were heavy, laden with a truth she couldn't deny, their weight suffocating, their presence alive, hungry. Elena's breath caught, her hands dropping from his shoulders, her heart hammering, her mind reeling, her pulse racing. How do you know that? Because she told me, Jonas said, his voice soft, almost reverent, his eyes fixed on the shadows, as if seeing something she couldn't, his hands trembling, his breath shallow, his pulse racing, his skin graying. She's in my head, Elena. And now she's in yours. Chapter 6, A Wall That Moves. The next morning, Elena dragged Jonas to the west corridor, ignoring his protests, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination, her hands gripping his arm like a lifeline, her breath shallow, her pulse racing, her eyes darting to the shadows, their edges sharp, their presence alive. The wall looked wrong, its edges sharper, its surface bulging slightly, like a swollen bruise, pulsing faintly under the lamplight, a rhythm that matched her racing pulse, echoing in her chest like a drum, its presence heavy, hungry. She pulled out her tape measure, her hands unsteady, her breath catching, her eyes scanning the stone, her heart thudding, her pulse racing. The dimensions were off, 3 inches wider than yesterday, the stone rippling as if it had a heartbeat, the roses above it curling tighter, their thorns gleaming like blades, catching the light in a way that made her skin crawl, her stomach twist, her heart pound, her pulse race. Don't touch it, Elena warned, grabbing Jonas's arm as he reached out, his fingers trembling, his eyes glassy, his breath shallow, his skin graying, as if the house were draining him, sip by sip, its presence heavy, hungry. Jonas, don't. I have to, he said, his voice distant, almost reverent, as if speaking to someone else, his eyes fixed on the wall, unblinking, his breath shallow, his hands trembling, his pulse racing. She's calling me. His fingers grazed the stone, and a red smear bloomed, thick and viscous, following his hand like a shadow, its surface glistening, pulsing with a life of its own, glowing faintly in the dim light, its presence alive, hungry. He gasped, yanking his hand back, but the smear pulsed, spreading across the wall, forming veins that throbbed with a sickening rhythm, casting eerie shadows that danced like specters, their edges sharp, alive, their presence heavy, hungry. Jonas. Elena grabbed him, pulling him away, her nails digging into his skin, her voice trembling with panic, her heart pounding, her breath ragged, her pulse racing. The air vibrated with a low hum, like a heartbeat, shaking the floor, dust raining from the ceiling, the roses above the wall writhing, their petals curling like claws, their thorns dripping red, gleaming like blood, their presence alive, hungry. "What did you do?" "It's her," Jonas whispered, his eyes wide with terror, his hands trembling as he stared at the wall, his breath shallow, his voice barely audible, his skin graying, his pulse fading. "She's awake. And she's angry." The wall groaned, a deep, guttural sound that shook the corridor, cracked spiderwebbing across its surface, the stone rippling like flesh, the red veins spreading further, crawling up the wall like roots, pulsing in time with Elena's racing heart, the air growing thicker, heavier, suffocating, its presence heavy, hungry. She dragged Jonas back, her hands slick with sweat, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps, her heart thudding, her pulse racing. "We're leaving," she said, her voice shaking, her eyes darting to the shadows, their edges sharp, their presence alive, her mind racing. "Now." But Jonas didn't move, his gaze fixed on the wall, his lips moving silently, as if speaking to someone she couldn't see, his eyes gleaming with a light that wasn't his, a light that made her blood run cold, her stomach twist, her heart pound. "She wants me," he murmured, his voice soft, almost tender, his hands trembling, his breath shallow, his pulse fading. "She's always wanted me." The air grew colder, the shadows twisting into shapes, hands reaching, eyes gleaming, a woman's face with hollow eyes, her mouth open in a silent scream, her hands clawing at the air, her nails dripping red, her presence heavy, alive, hungry. Elena pulled harder, her hands shaking, her voice raw, her heart pounding, her pulse racing. "Jonas, move," she screamed, but his body was limp, his eyes distant, as if the house were claiming him already, the veins crawling toward him, their red glow pulsing faster, hungrier, their presence alive, hungry. The corridor seemed to shrink, the walls closing in, the roses above curling tighter, their thorns dripping red, the air thick with the stench of blood and rot, cloying, suffocating, coating her throat. Elena's screams echoed, swallowed by the house, the wall pulsing, its veins reaching for her now, as if tasting her fear, her grief, her blood, whispering her name, circling like a predator, its presence suffusing every moment, alive, hungry. Chapter 7, A Glimpse Through Stone. That night, Jonas's recklessness took over, his mind unraveling like thread, drawn to the west corridor like a moth to flame, his footsteps silent but purposeful, his breath shallow, his eyes glassy, his pulse fading. Elena found him standing before the wall, his hands pressed against the stone, blood pouring from it in thick, slow rivulets, pooling at his feet, warm and sticky, the stench of iron filling the air, overall. Helming, choking, coating her throat, filling her lungs. The lamplight flickered, casting wild shadows, the roses above the wall seeming to bleed red, their petals dripping, their thorns gleaming like teeth, curling tighter as if alive, their presence heavy, hungry, alive. "Jonas, stop!" Elena screamed, grabbing his arm, her nails digging into his skin, her heart pounding, her voice raw with panic, her breath ragged, her pulse racing. "Get away from it!" But it was too late. The world blurred, and a vision slammed into them both, sharp and vivid, like a blade to the mind, cutting through reality, tearing through their thoughts, heavy with intent. A woman, her hair matted with blood, her dress torn, was dragged by a man in a velvet coat, his face cruel, his eyes gleaming with malice, his hands bruising her arms as he forced her into a narrow space behind the wall, his smile a slash of cruelty, his voice dripping with venom, heavy with intent. "I silence you for good, Catherine," he hissed, his words a curse, his hands tightening as she screamed, her nails clawing at the stone, her cries muffled as bricks sealed her in, her hands leaving bloody streaks that pulsed with life, her eyes wide with terror, her voice echoing, endless, trapped, her presence heavy, alive, hungry. Elena staggered back, gasping for air, her vision swimming, her stomach churning, her hands trembling as she clutched her head, her heart pounding, her breath ragged, her pulse racing. Jonas clutched his head, blood trickling from his nose, his eyes wide with terror, his breath shallow, his body trembling, his skin graying, as if the house were draining him, sip by sip, its presence heavy, hungry. The wall trembled, cracks spiderwebbing across its surface, dust raining down, the air thick with the stench of blood and rot, the roses above curling tighter, their thorns dripping red, gleaming like blood, their presence alive, hungry. A whisper slithered through the air, cold and relentless, echoing in their minds, heavy with intent. You see me now. Elena, Jonas croaked, his voice barely human, his hands trembling as he sank to his knees, his eyes glassy, his breath shallow, his skin graying, his pulse fading, as if the house were claiming him, pulling him into itself. She's not just in the wall. She's in us. The corridor seemed to shrink, the shadows twisting into claws, reaching for them, the roses above the wall pulsing, their red glow casting eerie shadows that danced like specters, their edges sharp, alive, their presence heavy, hungry. Elena grabbed Jonas, dragging him out, her hands slick with his blood, her heart pounding, her breath ragged, her voice raw, her pulse racing. The wall groaned behind them, its cracks widening, as if trying to pull them back, the whisper circling them, a chorus of voices now, all saying the same name, Catherine, Catherine, Catherine. We're getting out of here, Elena said, her voice trembling with defiance, her hands shaking as she pulled him down the corridor, the floorboards creaking, the air growing thicker, heavier, suffocating, the shadows following, their edges sharp, their presence alive, hungry. But Jonas's eyes were distant, his body heavy, his breath shallow, his pulse fading, as if the house were draining him, sip by sip, claiming him as its own, the veins crawling toward him, their red glow pulsing faster, hungrier, their presence heavy, alive. The shadows twisted, forming shapes, hands reaching, eyes gleaming, a woman's face with hollow eyes, her mouth open in a silent scream, her hands clawing at the air, her nails dripping red, her voice whispering, relentless, circling like a predator, you can't run from me. Chapter 8, Mrs. Calder's Past. Elena cornered Mrs. Calder in the kitchen the next morning, her patience shattered, her hands trembling with rage and fear, her heart pounding like a drum, her breath shallow, her eyes burning with tears, her pulse racing. The old woman was scrubbing a pot, her movements slow and deliberate, but her hands shook, betraying her calm, her eyes darting to the shadows as if expecting something to lunge from them, her breath shallow, her skin pale, her presence fragile, haunted. What's happening to this house? Elena demanded, slamming her fist on the table, the sound echoing like a gunshot, the wood trembling under her hand, her voice raw with desperation, her pulse racing. Who was Catherine? And don't give me vague warnings, I want answers, now. Mrs. Calder's hands froze, her face pale as ash, her eyes glinting with fear and something darker, resignation, or guilt, their depths heavy with secrets, their gaze piercing, alive. You touched it, didn't you? Her voice was low, accusing, her gaze boring into Elena's, sharp and unyielding, cutting through her like a blade, heavy with intent. I told you not to. My grandmother was a maid here when Catherine disappeared. She was the Lord's wife, beautiful, headstrong, too clever for her own good. She challenged him, questioned his secrets, his rituals. He locked her away. Alive. Behind that wall. The servants heard her screams for weeks, saw the walls weep red, like blood, staining the stone, pooling on the floor, dripping like tears, their presence alive, hungry. They called it rain, but we knew. We all knew. Why didn't you tell me? Elena snapped, her voice shaking, her hands clenched into fists, her nails biting into her palms, her eyes burning with tears, her heart twisting at the thought of Jonas, his glassy eyes, his trembling hands, his skin graying, his pulse fading. You let me walk into this blind, let my brother. Her voice broke, her breath catching, her hands trembling as she leaned closer, her voice raw with anger and fear, her pulse racing. Because you wouldn't have believed me, Mrs. Calder said, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, her voice breaking, her hands trembling as she set the pot down, her breath shallow, her skin pale, her presence fragile, haunted. No one does. They come, they touch the wall, and the house takes them. Maids, workers, travelers, it's taken so many. My grandmother tried to warn them, but they never listened. She saw it happen, saw the walls bleed, heard the screams, and she carried that fear until she died, her heart heavy with guilt, her dreams haunted by Catherine's voice. And now it's taken you, and him. Takes them. Elena's voice rose, her heart pounding, her mind racing, her hands shaking as she leaned closer, her breath hot with anger, her eyes burning, her pulse racing. What does that mean? What does it want? Mrs. Calder leaned closer, her breath sour, her voice a whisper that sent chills down Elena's spine, her eyes hollow, haunted, heavy with despair, their gaze piercing, alive. It wants blood, Miss Voss. It always has. Catherine's blood started it, sealed it in the walls, and now it wants yours, and his. She glanced toward the door, where Jonas's shadow lingered, his eyes glassy, his hands trembling, his breath shallow, his skin graying, his pulse fading, as if the house were already inside him, draining him, claiming him, its presence heavy, hungry. Elena's stomach churned, her breath catching, her hands trembling as she gripped the table, her nails digging into the wood, her heart thudding, her pulse racing. There's a way out of this, isn't there? A way to stop it? Mrs. Calder's lips twisted into a bitter smile, her eyes hollow, her voice soft but heavy with despair, her hands trembling, her presence fragile, haunted. If there is, no one's found it. The house always wins. It's older than you, older than me, older than time itself. And it's patient. It waits. It watches. It hungers. Elena grabbed her arm, her voice fierce, her eyes burning with defiance, her heart pounding, her pulse racing. I'm not letting it take us. Tell me how to fight it. Mrs. Calder pulled away, her smile fading, her eyes dark with pity, her voice barely a whisper, heavy with intent. You can't fight a house, Miss Voss. You can only run, and even then, it follows. It always follows. Elena's heart pounded, her hands shaking, her mind racing, her breath shallow, her pulse racing. She turned to Jonas, standing in the doorway, his eyes fixed on the floor, his hands trembling, his skin graying, his breath shallow, his pulse fading, as if the house were draining him, sip by sip. We're not running, she said, her voice trembling but resolute, her eyes burning with defiance, her heart thudding. We're fighting. But Jonas's eyes met hers, hollow and haunted, his voice barely a whisper, his hands trembling, his skin graying, his pulse fading. It's too late, Elena. It's always been too late. Chapter 9, The Night Room. Jonas vanished that night, slipping out of his room like a shadow, his footsteps silent but purposeful, drawn to the west corridor like a moth to flame, his breath shallow, his eyes glassy, his pulse fading, his heart heavy with dread. Elena searched the manor, her flashlight cutting through the dark, its beam trembling in her hand, her heart pounding, her breath shallow, her mind racing with fear, her hands shaking, her pulse racing. She found a door in the west corridor, one that hadn't been there before, its wood warped, its hinges rusted, as if it had grown from the house itself, a wound in the stone, bleeding secrets, its presence heavy, hungry. It was ajar, revealing a chamber of raw stone, its walls covered in finger scratches, deep and bloody, as if carved by 100 hands in a frenzy of despair, their edges stained with red that glistened like fresh blood, pulsing with a life of its own, their presence alive, hungry. A wedding veil lay in the corner, soaked in dried blood, its lace brittle as bone, its edges frayed like a screen frozen in time, its presence heavy with grief, its weight suffocating, its presence alive, hungry. Jonas stood in the center, his hands smeared red, his eyes glassy, his lips moving silently, as if chanting a prayer to the stone, his breath shallow, his body trembling, his skin graying, his pulse fading, as if the house were draining him, sip by sip, its presence heavy, hungry. "Your name," a voice rasped, not from Jonas but from the stone itself, cold and sharp as a blade, echoing in the chamber like a curse, cutting through the silence, circling like a predator, heavy with intent. It will fit nicely next to hers. Elena grabbed his arm, her nails digging into his skin, her voice trembling with panic, her heart pounding, her breath ragged, her pulse racing. "Jonas, snap out of it. We're leaving, now." He turned, his gaze distant, his lips curling into a smile that wasn't his eyes gleaming with a light that wasn't human, a light that made her blood run cold, her stomach twist, her heart thudding. "She won't let us, Elena. She's part of me now. She's always been." The door slammed shut, the lock clicking with a finality that echoed like a gunshot, the sound reverberating in the chamber, shaking the walls, the air growing thicker, heavier, suffocating, its presence heavy, hungry. Elena pounded on it, her screams swallowed by the house, her fists bruising against the wood, her voice raw with desperation, her heart pounding, her pulse racing. "Open the door," she shouted, her hands slick with sweat, her breath shallow, her eyes burning with tears, her pulse racing. "Catherine, let us go." The voice answered, soft and mocking, echoing from every surface, circling them like a predator, its words sharp as knives, heavy with intent. "You opened my tomb. Now you stay." The shadows twisted, forming shapes, hands reaching, eyes gleaming, a woman's face with hollow eyes, her mouth open in a silent scream, her hands clawing at the air, her nails dripping red, her presence heavy, alive, hungry. Jonas sank to his knees, his hands pressed to the floor, his breath shallow, his skin graying, his eyes glassy, his pulse fading, as if the house were draining him, sip by sip. "She's in me," he whispered, his voice breaking, his eyes fixed on the wall, his hands trembling, his pulse fading. "She's always been in me." Elena grabbed him, pulling him to his feet, her hands shaking, her voice fierce, her heart pounding, her pulse racing. "We're not staying here, Jonas. We're getting out." But the walls seemed to close in, the air growing heavier, the blood pooling higher, lapping at their ankles, warm and alive, its stench overwhelming, choking, coating her throat, the scratches on the walls bleeding anew, the red liquid dripping, forming veins that pulsed with a sickening rhythm, the shadows alive, their edges sharp, reaching for them, whispering her name, circling like a predator. Elena pounded on the door, her hands bruising, her screams echoing, her heart thudding, her pulse racing, but the house answered with silence, the blood rising, the air humming, the shadows curling like fingers, their presence heavy, claiming her as its own, its voice whispering, relentless, hungry. Chapter 10, The Truth Beneath. Desperate, Elena and Jonas returned with crowbars, tearing at the wall with a frenzy born of fear and defiance, their hands trembling, their breaths ragged, their hearts pounding, their pulses racing. Bricks crumbled, revealing a hidden space barely wide enough for a person, its air thick with the stench of decay, the walls slick with red liquid that glistened like blood, dripping like tears, pooling at their feet, warm and alive, its stench choking, coating their throats. Inside sat a skeleton, upright, facing inward, its bones yellowed with age, its eye sockets gouged, as if clawed out in agony, its hands curled into claws, frozen in a final act of defiance, its presence heavy with grief, its weight suffocating, its presence alive, hungry. Carved into the brick, still I watch. Elena's stomach churned, her breath catching, her hands trembling as she gripped the crowbar, her heart pounding, her eyes burning with tears, her pulse racing. "Catherine," she whispered, her voice breaking, barely audible in the oppressive silence, the name echoing in her mind like a curse, heavy with intent, circling like a predator. The skeleton's head tilted, just slightly, with a faint crack that echoed in the chamber like a gunshot, the sound cutting through the silence, shaking the walls, reverberating in her bones. Jonas screamed, dropping his crowbar, his hands shaking, his eyes wide with terror, his breath shallow, his skin graying, his pulse fading, as if the house were draining him, sip by sip, its presence heavy, hungry. Blood seeped from the bones, pooling at their feet, warm and alive, its stench filling the air, thick and cloying, overwhelming, choking, coating their throats. The walls groaned, the air turning suffocating, the shadows twisting into shapes, hands reaching, eyes gleaming, a woman's face with hollow eyes, her mouth open in a silent scream, her hands clawing at the air, her nails dripping red, her presence heavy, alive, hungry. "You opened my tomb," the voice hissed, echoing from every surface, cold and relentless, cutting through the air like a blade, circling them like a predator, its words sharp as knives, heavy with intent. "Now give me what was taken." Elena grabbed Jonas, pulling him back, her voice trembling with defiance, her hands slick with his blood, her heart pounding, her breath ragged, her pulse racing. "We're not giving you anything," she shouted, her words echoing in the chamber, her eyes burning with tears, her voice raw with desperation, her pulse racing. But the house answered with a low, mocking laugh, the blood pooling higher, lapping at their ankles, warm and sticky, its stench overwhelming, choking, coating their throats, the walls pulsing, their veins spreading, reaching for them, whispering her name, circling like a predator. Jonas's breath was shallow, his eyes glassy, his hands trembling as he stared at the skeleton, his voice barely a whisper, his skin graying, his pulse fading, his heart heavy with dread. "It's her," he said, his voice breaking, his eyes fixed on the wall, his hands shaking, his pulse fading. "She's been waiting for me." Elena shook him, her hands trembling, her voice fierce, her heart pounding, her pulse racing. "Jonas, look at me. We're getting out of here." But the walls seemed to pulse, the blood rising, the air growing thicker, heavier, suffocating, as if the house were closing its jaws around them, the shadows alive, their edges sharp, curling like fingers, whispering her name, circling like a predator, their presence heavy, hungry. Chapter 11, Catherine Speaks. The wall bled constantly now, staining the floor, the pipes, the mirrors, the air itself thick with the stench of iron and rot, a cloying smell that clung to Elena's skin, filled her lungs, choked her, coated her throat like a second skin, suffocating her with dread. Catherine's voice echoed everywhere, through the plumbing, the glass, the paint, a relentless chorus of whispers that burrowed into their minds, sharp as knives, cutting through the silence like a scream, circling like a predator, heavy with intent. "Find what was taken," she hissed, her words cold and relentless, echoing in their minds, heavy with intent, her voice a blade that cut through their thoughts, circling like a noose. "Give it back, or join me." Jonas grew worse, sketching roses obsessively, his hands trembling, his skin graying, rotting at the edges, his eyes sunken into dark hollows, his breath shallow, his body wasting away, his pulse fading, as if the house were draining him, sip by sip, claiming him as its own, its presence heavy, hungry. His fingers, stained with ink and blood, moved frantically, sketching thorns that dripped red, roses that pulsed with a life of their own, their petals curling like claws, their presence heavy, hungry, alive. Elena found his childhood drawings in his bag, sketches of Graymarrow, the wall, a woman with hollow eyes, her hands clawing at stone, her face twisted in agony, her eyes fixed on a figure with Jonas's face, bleeding into the stone, his eyes empty, his hands clawing at nothing, his mouth open in a silent scream, the pages yellowed and brittle, their edges stained with red, pulsing with a life of their own, their presence heavy, hungry. "Jonas," she whispered, her voice cracking, her heart breaking, her hands trembling as she held the drawings, her eyes burning with tears, her breath shallow, her pulse racing, her heart heavy with guilt. "How did you know?" "I've always known," he said, his eyes feverish, his voice barely a whisper, his hands trembling as he clutched a pencil, sketching another rose, its thorns dripping red, its petals pulsing with a sickening rhythm, its presence heavy, alive, hungry. "She's been in my dreams since I was a kid. The house, the wall, her face, she's been waiting." "For what?" Elena asked, dread pooling in her chest, her hands shaking as she grabbed his shoulders, her nails digging into his skin, her voice trembling with fear and desperation, her heart pounding, her pulse racing, her breath ragged. "For me," he said, his gaze fixed on the wall, his eyes gleaming with a light that wasn't his, a light that made her blood run cold, her stomach twist, her heart thudding. "For my blood. It's in my blood." Elena's breath caught, her mind racing, her heart pounding, her hands trembling, her pulse racing, her heart heavy with dread. "You're not doing this, Jonas. We'll find a way out. We have to." But Jonas's smile was hollow, his eyes distant, his voice soft and resigned, his hands trembling as he sketched, the roses growing darker, their thorns sharper, their petals pulsing with a life of their own, their presence heavy, hungry, alive. "You can't fight a house, Elena. It's bigger than us. It's older than us. It's eternal." She shook her head, tears streaming down her face, her voice fierce, her hands trembling as she held him, her heart breaking, her breath ragged, her pulse racing. "I'm not losing you. Not to this place. We'll fight it together." But Jonas's hand slipped from hers, his fingers cold, his eyes fixed on the wall, his voice barely a whisper, his breath shallow, his skin graying, his pulse fading, his heart heavy with dread. "It's too late," he said, his voice breaking, his eyes gleaming with a light that wasn't human, a light that made her blood run cold, her stomach twist. "It's always been too late." Chapter 12, Jonas bleeds. Jonas began coughing blood, his skin rotting at the edges, his eyes sunken into dark hollows, his breath shallow and ragged, his body trembling, his pulse fading, as if the house were draining him, sip by sip, claiming him as its own, its presence heavy, hungry, alive. I was born into this, he rasped, clutching Elena's hand, his fingers cold as death, his grip weak, his eyes gleaming with a feverish intensity, his breath shallow, his skin graying, his pulse fading, his heart heavy with dread. The house, it knows me. I've been here before. Stay with me, Jonas. Elena pleaded, checking his pulse, weak, erratic, fading, like a candle flickering out, her hands trembling, her heart breaking, her eyes burning with tears, her breath ragged, her pulse racing. She found more drawings in his bag, older ones, from before his first breakdown, yellowed and brittle, but vivid with horror, their edges stained with red, pulsing with a life of their own, their presence heavy, hungry, alive. They showed the manor, the wall, the roses, and a figure with Jonas's face, bleeding into the stone, his eyes empty, his hands clawing at nothing, his mouth open in a silent scream, the pages heavy with grief, their weight suffocating, their presence alive, hungry. The wall pulsed, its red veins glowing, spreading like roots across the corridor, their light casting eerie shadows that danced like specters, their edges sharp, alive, their presence heavy, hungry. Jonas staggered toward it, his hands outstretched, his body trembling, his voice a whisper, soft and reverent, his eyes gleaming with a light that wasn't his pulse fading, his heart heavy with dread. She's calling me, he said, his lips moving silently, as if praying to the stone, his skin peeling away in thin, translucent strips, dissolving into the wall like mist, his breath shallow, his pulse fading, his heart fading. Jonas, no. Elena screamed, pounding the wall, her fists slick with his blood, her voice raw with desperation, her heart shattering, her breath ragged, her eyes burning with tears, her pulse racing. The stone drank his blood, glowing brighter, pulsing faster, the air vibrating with a low, guttural hum, the stench of blood and rot overwhelming, choking, coating her throat, filling her lungs. His body trembled, his skin peeling away, his eyes fluttering, his breath shallow, his voice barely audible, his pulse fading, his heart heavy with dread. "Run, Elena," he whispered, his eyes fixed on the wall, his hands trembling, his skin graying, his pulse fading, his heart fading. "Before it takes you too." Elena fell to her knees, sobbing, her hands slick with blood, her heart pounding, her voice breaking, her eyes burning with tears, her pulse racing, her heart heavy with grief. "What do you want from us?" she shouted, her words echoing, her hands clawing at the stone, her nails breaking against its surface, her breath ragged, her heart thudding, her pulse racing. Catherine's voice answered, cold and clear, cutting through the air like a blade, echoing in her mind, circling like a predator, heavy with intent, him. His blood. His name. The debt must be paid. The wall pulsed faster, its veins crawling toward her, the blood pooling higher, lapping at her knees, warm and alive, its stench overwhelming, choking, coating her throat, the shadows twisting, their edges sharp, reaching for her, whispering her name, circling like a predator, their presence heavy, hungry, alive. Elena's screams echoed, swallowed by the house, the air growing thicker, heavier, suffocating, as if the house were closing its jaws around her, claiming her as its own, its presence suffusing every moment, alive, hungry, eternal. Chapter 13, The Husband Returns. Under the floorboards, Elena found a leather-bound journal, its pages brittle with age, its ink faded but legible, the words written in a spidery script that seemed to crawl across the page, alive and hungry, their edges sharp, their presence heavy, alive. The final entry read, "The wall holds her voice now. My blood must never touch it, or she will rise. I am cursed, as are my heirs. The house will never forget. It will never forgive. Elena's blood ran cold, her hands trembling as she read the words, the truth sinking in like a blade, cutting through her heart, her breath catching, her eyes burning with tears, her pulse racing, her heart heavy with dread. Jonas's visions, his dreams, his bloodline. "You're his," she whispered, staring at her brother, who lay slumped against the wall, his breath shallow, his skin graying, his eyes distant, his hands trembling, his pulse fading, his heart heavy with dread, as if the house were draining him, sip by sip. The nobleman's heir. Jonas laughed, a hollow, broken sound that echoed in the silence, chilling her to the bone, a laugh that wasn't his, sharp and jagged like broken glass, its edges cutting through the silence, heavy with intent. "She's been waiting for me, Elena. All these years. I'm the key." "No," Elena said, grabbing his arm, her voice fierce, her nails digging into his skin, her eyes burning with tears, her heart pounding, her pulse racing, her breath ragged. "You're not doing this. We'll burn this place down if we have to. We'll destroy it." But Jonas's eyes were distant, his voice soft, almost serene, his lips curling into a smile that wasn't his eyes gleaming with a light that wasn't human, a light that made her blood run cold, her stomach twist, her heart thudding. "You can't burn a curse, Elena. It's in the stones, the air, the blood. It's in me." She shook him, tears streaming down her face, her voice breaking with desperation, her heart shattering, her hands trembling, her pulse racing, her breath ragged. "I won't let you do this. You're all I have left. We'll fight it together." He touched her cheek, his fingers cold, his smile sad, his eyes gleaming with a light that made her blood run cold, his breath shallow, his pulse fading, his heart heavy with dread. "You can't save me," he whispered, his voice breaking, his eyes fixed on the wall, his hands trembling, his pulse fading, his heart fading. "But you can save yourself. Run, Elena. Run." Elena sobbed, her hands trembling as she held him, her heart pounding, her breath ragged, her eyes burning with tears, her pulse racing, her heart heavy with grief. But his body was heavy, his breath shallow, his eyes fixed on the wall, the veins pulsing faster, the air humming, the shadows twisting into shapes, hands, eyes, a woman's face, smiling, her mouth dripping red, her voice whispering, relentless, circling like a predator, "He's mine." Chapter 14, The Blood Unlocks. Jonas broke free, stumbling to the wall, his body trembling, his hands outstretched, his voice breaking, his eyes filled with a strange, resigned peace, his breath shallow, his pulse fading, his heart heavy with dread. "I'm sorry, Elena," he said, pressing both hands to the stone, his voice soft, almost reverent, his eyes gleaming with a light that wasn't his, a light that made her blood run cold, her stomach twist, her heart thudding. The wall pulsed, red veins spreading like roots, drinking him in, his blood gushing in a torrent that cracked the wall down the center, a jagged wound splitting the corridor, the sound like a scream tearing through the silence, shaking the house to its foundations, the air thick with the stench of blood and rot, coating her throat, choking her. Elena screamed, clawing at the air, her hands slick with his blood, her voice raw with anguish, her heart shattering, her eyes burning with tears, her breath ragged, her pulse racing. "Jonas, no." But he was gone, his body dissolving into the wall, layer by layer, his skin peeling away, his blood pooling, his eyes closing as the stone swallowed him whole, leaving only a smear of red that pulsed like a heartbeat, glowing in the dim light, its presence heavy, hungry, alive. The house shook, dust raining from the ceiling, the walls groaning as if in triumph, the roses above curling tighter, their thorns dripping red, gleaming like teeth, their petals pulsing with a sickening rhythm, their presence alive, hungry. A dark passage opened beyond the broken stone, its depths swallowing the light, the air cold and heavy, like a tomb, the walls slick with red liquid that dripped like tears, pooling at her feet, warm and alive, its stench choking, coating her throat. Catherine's voice echoed, triumphant, cutting through the silence like a blade, echoing in Elena's mind, circling like a predator, heavy with intent, the debt is paid. Elena fell to her knees, sobbing, her hands trembling as she reached for the passage, her flashlight flickering in the dark, its beam barely piercing the gloom, her heart pounding, her breath ragged, her pulse racing, her heart heavy with grief. "You took him," she whispered, her voice breaking, her heart shattered, her hands slick with his blood, her eyes burning with tears, her pulse racing. "You took my brother." The house answered with silence, but the wall pulsed, its veins spreading further, crawling toward her feet, the blood pooling higher, lapping at her knees, warm and alive, its stench overwhelming, choking, coating her throat, filling her lungs. The shadows twisted, forming shapes, hands reaching, eyes gleaming, a woman's face with hollow eyes, her mouth open in a silent scream, her hands clawing at the air, her nails dripping red, her voice whispering, relentless, circling like a predator, "You're next." Elena scrambled to her feet, her breath ragged, her heart pounding, her flashlight flickering, the passage closing, the walls pulsing, the air growing thicker, heavier, suffocating, as if the house were sealing her in, claiming her as its own, its presence heavy, hungry, alive. She ran, her screams echoing, swallowed by the house, the shadows following, their edges sharp, their fingers brushing her skin, their eyes gleaming in the dark, their voices whispering, circling, claiming her as their own, their presence suffusing every moment, alive, hungry, eternal. Chapter 15, The Wall No More. Elena crawled through the passage, her flashlight trembling in her hand, its beam flickering, barely piercing the darkness, swallowed by the gloom, its light trembling like her heart, its presence weak against the house's hunger. The air was thick with the stench of blood and decay, the walls slick with red liquid that dripped like tears, pooling at her feet, warm and alive, its stench choking, overwhelming, coating her throat, filling her lungs, suffocating her with dread. The passage seemed to twist, the walls closing in, the shadows pulsing with a life of their own, their edges sharp, whispering her name, circling like a predator, their presence heavy, hungry, alive. At the end of the passage stood Catherine, her face pale, her eyes black voids that seemed to drink the light, her dress tattered, her hands clawing at the air, her nails dripping red, her presence heavy with grief and malice, her voice a blade that cut through the silence, heavy with intent. "You gave me my name back," she whispered, her lips curling into a smile that wasn't human, her eyes gleaming with a light that wasn't alive, her voice soft, almost grateful, but heavy with intent, circling like a predator, cutting through her thoughts. "And my freedom." She dissolved into mist, fading into the dark, her presence lingering like a cold breath on Elena's neck, her voice echoing, relentless, whispering her name, circling like a noose, heavy with intent. Elena staggered out, collapsing in the courtyard, the manor looming behind her, its spires cutting the sky like knives, its gargoyles leering, their eyes gleaming with a light that wasn't stone, their mouths open in silent screams, their presence heavy, hungry, alive. The air was lighter, the silence softer, as if the curse had lifted, but Elena's heart pounded, her breath ragged, her hands trembling, her flashlight flickering out, plunging her into darkness, the shadows curling like fingers, their edges sharp, their presence alive, hungry. She turned back, her eyes sweeping the manor, and saw it, a new wall forming where the old one stood, its stone fresh but already stained, red seeping through the plaster, slow and deliberate, like a heartbeat, pulsing with a life of its own, its presence heavy, hungry, alive. And in the stone, a new name began to carve itself, Elena. She froze, her breath catching, her heart pounding in her chest, her hands trembling, her mind racing, the shadows curling like fingers, their edges sharp, their eyes gleaming, their presence alive, hungry. The roses above the wall curled tighter, their thorns gleaming like teeth, dripping red, their petals pulsing with a sickening rhythm, their presence heavy, alive, hungry. A whisper followed her, soft and relentless, echoing in her mind, circling like a predator, cutting through her thoughts, heavy with intent. You're mine now. Elena ran, her screams swallowed by the mist, her footsteps pounding against the ground, her heart hammering, her breath ragged, her hands trembling, her pulse racing. But the house watched, its walls waiting, hungry for the next name, its shadows alive, their edges sharp, curling like fingers, their eyes gleaming in the dark, their voices whispering, circling, never stopping, their presence heavy, hungry, alive. The ground beneath her feet pulsed, the air hummed, the mist curled around her like a noose, and the shadows followed, forming shapes, hands, eyes, a woman's face, smiling, her mouth dripping red, her voice whispering, relentless, eternal, you can't run from me. The manor stood silent, but it wasn't empty. The walls pulsed, the air hummed, the shadows moved, their fingers brushing her skin, their eyes gleaming, their voices whispering, circling, claiming her as their own, as the house waited, patient, eternal, hungry, its presence suffusing every moment, alive, inescapable, forever.